A good horror game is a lot like a hot girl who isn't crazy. They're basically extinct nowadays.
Hey, that really sucked!
Which is why we're gonna take a trip back to 2008 and revisit one of the scariest, brick-shitting video games ever made. Dead Space. You might have noticed that AAA publishers and developers in recent years have kind of alienated, pun intended, the horror genre of gaming. Maybe it's because the subgenre of survival was hijacked by Minecraft and handed to a bunch of early access garbage that has since tarnished the reputation of survival games beyond repair. But seriously, in the last 8 years, we've had a good Resident Evil game, a couple shitty ones, The Evil Within 1 and 2, and not much else comes to mind as far as AAA games go. The indie market is really where the horror genre shines. What happened to companies wanting to scare the pants off their consumers? Perhaps survival horror just isn't as marketable a concept as it used to be. Or maybe it's because it's hard to create a scary video game when you're trying to sell loot boxes. No, wait! That's the best way to put fear in gamers. But seriously, Dead Space is a one-of-a-kind experience. There's nothing out there that feels quite like it. Now, before you go down to the comments, obviously, the developers at Visceral Games, God bless their souls, rest in peace, press F in the chat to pay respects, took heavy inspiration from Resident Evil 4's over-the-shoulder perspective, aiming and inventory management systems. The similarities are striking, to say the least. And speaking of systems, did you know Dead Space was originally going to be System Shock 3, and it was actually the release of Resident Evil 4 that caused the studio to rethink their approach with it, giving us the product we have now? This is a perfect case of a company taking inspiration from one thing and replicating it in a way that creates something new and fresh, without being just a blatant ripoff. We are concerned that Dead Space may be replicating the experience that Resident Evil 4 is known for. Ha! You thought I was finished with that meme? Where you at, Bluehole? Pieces of shit? Getting back on track, Dead Space is officially 10 years old. That's a long time for a horror game. So has the critical acclaim been sucked away by the space vacuum of time? Are the scares still scary? Do the gameplay mechanics and graphics hold up to this day? And was the story and universe any good or interesting? Well, let's go get ready to head down to
Isaac. Make us whole again.
Make us whole again.
Make us whole again. Isaac. Make us whole again.
The Dead Space franchise is pretty unique in how it progressed over the years, with each game being radically different than the last. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the marketing, commercials, and advertisements. Dead Space 1 was very clearly portrayed as a brutal horror game in the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star trailer. It was pretty intriguing, terrifying, it really drew you in. First time watching it, I knew this would be a game that would make me shit my pants and somehow make me enjoy it. Flash forward to Dead Space 2 and what we got for advertisements was this.
Oh my god! Oh gosh. I think it'll make a person become insane.
It's violent. It's everything you love in a game. And your mom's gonna hate it.
Why would they even make something like this?
Dead Space 2, rated M for mature.
Looking back, it's pretty goddamn cringy, but at the time, it almost made me want to show my mom this game, because she would definitely be one of those moms. As funny as it is, it's just not fitting for a horror game to be so self-aware and trying to be cool. Of course, Dead Space 3's marketing wasn't as bad, but they were just generic and boring advertisements. What I'm trying to show you is how different each game has been marketed and presented. Dead Space 1 comes across as simple, straightforward, and genuine. So the game starts off with a loading screen cutscene that establishes the basics and the setting. We also get this mission log that gives us the who, what, when, where, and why. Which is a much more interesting way than just having someone say it to us.
I haven't seen cheap...
Shut up, Fred! I'm reviewing Dead Space! Take notes, Black Ops 3, Battlefront 2, and Halo 5. Simplistic exposition. One ship, the USG Ishimura, is orbiting a planet and has had a communications blackout, which can only mean one thing.
Invasion.
It's up to the crew of the USG Kellyan to diagnose and fix the ship. The crew consists of Kendra Daniels, computer specialist, Zach Hammond, the chief security officer, a couple of guys who are gonna die, and Isaac Clarke, ship systems specialist, and the protagonist will be playing as.
Isaac, it's me. I wish I could talk to you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about everything. I wish I could just talk to someone. It's all falling apart here. I can't believe what's happening.
We learn that Isaac's journey to the Ishimura is personal, as his girlfriend Nicole is stationed there, and naturally he wants to get some of that puss-puss.
So you smell that? What's that? I smell pussy.
But there ain't gonna be no time for that, Isaac. Now, one thing that has always bugged me, and maybe it's because of how the plot is working in the background, we'll get to that later, but if humanity is so dependent on these external resources from other planets, and the USG Ishimura is such a highly valuable ship, you'd think they'd send more than like 4 people there to go and fix it and diagnose what's wrong. But again, that could just be, you know, part of the twist near the end. Anyways, so your rescue ship crashes onto the Ishimura, and it's up to Isaac and the gang to figure out what's going on.
Seems like everyone was trying to pack in a hurry.
The place seems deserted, and you gotta walk into this room, press a button, and yeah, pretty self-explanatory game. We see a damage report pop up on that floating mini-screen. You know, that's a cool way to display the information to us, and oh, what's that? Some sort of lockdown procedure, I guess.
What the hell was that? The hell? I don't know, something's in the room with us.
Not sure what's gonna... Oh god, what the hell is that shit? Oh lord! Jesus, we just lost 2 men!
Isaac, get the hell out of there!
Run, you piece of shit! Come on, open the fucking door! Alright, I'm safe in the elevator. Alright, I'm safe in the... Help! For the love of God! Ah! We made it! I can't believe we made it! Son, you just ran across the hall. Let's not throw a party till we fix the ship. Now, we'll get into the story of Dead Space down the line, but for now I'd like to talk about the game's presentation and how phenomenal it is stylistically. I knew right off the bat that Dead Space was going to be special the instant I saw this shot. The way it all comes into view, the ship, the planet, bits of debris floating around, it's the calm before the storm. The presentation of what happens in the game just feels so natural, probably because there are very few instances where control is taken away from the player.
Isaac? Is that really you?
Just take a look at this scene near the end of Chapter 1, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Isaac is trying to repair the Kellion, but naturally there is no escape for our silent hero. And then, boom. Notice how after the ship explodes, you're thrown right into the combat, no loading screens, it's like it wasn't even a cutscene. That's the presentation I'm talking about. A good horror game needs to maintain immersion, and Dead Space doesn't shatter that with countless unskippable cutscenes. And all the scenes in-game are rendered with the in-game graphics and assets, so when the plot is moving along on screen, it feels the same as if you're just, shooting the necromorphs. A lot of times video games will yank you out of the gameplay in order to show off some flashy Super HD cutscene. Blizzard games are a perfect example of this contrast in graphics, which can sometimes be pretty jarring. Here's Warcraft 3 gameplay, and here's a pre-rendered cutscene. Now, I'm not saying every game needs to abide by this idea, I'm just giving Dead Space and Visceral Games some much needed credit and respect for making this decision because it adds so much to the presentation and feeling of the game. Aside from that though, Dead Space is one of the most graphically sound video games I've ever seen. 10 years later, this game looks fantastic. It doesn't quite have the timeless art style of Halo 3, or the cartoony visuals of Conquer Live and Reloaded, or something like Super Mario Sunshine. All these games that look good years down the line, there's something to be said for that. And it's hard to find a spot in Dead Space in the entire game where you look at it and you're like, ooh god, that looks really bad now. The graphics are just fantastic. And once again, presentation in a horror game is so important, so when the visuals maintain this level of quality 10 years later, and I don't feel like I'm playing a butt-fucking ugly game, that's incredible. What's interesting is the world of Dead Space is captivating for the same reasons that I talked about in my Dark Souls Masterpiece video. The universe feels cohesive and logically sound because every part of Dead Space functions in a way that relates to the story, lore, and gameplay. Think about the settings and the characters. Isaac is an engineer, repairman aboard a vessel whose purpose is to mine resources. And Zach Hammond is a security officer, so, obviously these planet crackers have some sort of military backing in case shit goes wrong. With this in mind, when you look at the weapons, they feel more like tools. The plasma cutter would probably be something you'd use to clip wires or cut out a piece of rock. Basically a utility tool. The force gun would likely be used to push rocks and debris along. And you might look at stasis as something the developers put into the game so the player can slow down the necromorphs and maneuver around easier. But being around all this huge, dangerous equipment, it's probably useful for crew members to slow parts of the ship down in order to move around and fix stuff. And it's entirely feasible to think that this many years in the future with such advanced technology, that they've created stasis or some sort of time-slowing thing. And the zero-G areas aren't just a gimmick, you're in fucking space. There's gonna be zero gravity sometimes. And it's like when you start using your imagination and connecting the dots between the weapons, locations, this universe, the suits people wear, and the way everything functions, it all makes perfect sense. Now, of course, a video game needs to show you your life bar, your ammo, map screens, menus, all that stuff. One of the coolest and most unique aspects of Dead Space is the way it presents all the information to the player. The suit is the perfect example. While it would have been easy to just slap a health bar in the top left corner with a stasis meter and ammo count in the bottom right, just like every other video game, the designers took the opportunity with the setting they created to display that important video game information in a more creative and immersive way. Your health is displayed on your back, clear and visible. And you could probably imagine that with all these guys working in space and dangerous locations with possible foreign aliens that could attack or whatever, that it'd be important for all the crew members to be able to see how healthy everyone is at a glance.
Hold still, Isaac. I'm syncing up everyone's rig with the ship. Okay, we're done. Clean bill of health for everyone.
Ammo is displayed above the weapon itself, clearly visible, because if you were a miner or whatever, it'd be helpful for the tools to tell you how much ammo you have while you work. Also, because these guys work out in space, they'd likely have some video screen set up so they could Skype chat with each other from different parts of the ship.
Zelda, Duke Onkled is under attack by the evil forces of Ganon. I'm going to Gamelon to aid him.
And if they wanted to read journal logs or listen to audio recordings, whether they send each other stuff like, hey, go fix this shit, well, the suit covers all those bases too. And the neatest part about it is whenever something's playing or you're reading a log or looking at the map screen, you can still move Isaac. It's not a pause menu. What's funny is I don't think anyone would have complained, noticed, or cared if the journal, map screen, inventory, waypoints, ammo, health, and all that were displayed in the traditional manner. But it's because in this regard of video games that Dead Space is different, that it makes it one of the most vivid aspects of the game. There's nothing else that looks like this, that has this type of interface. A cohesive universe where all the components make sense and work alongside each other is an invaluable asset for creating an authentic and captivating single-player experience. And Dead Space is able to utilize all these elements I talked about of storytelling, world-building, and gameplay mechanics to great success, and it makes the Ishimura and the Dead Space universe feel so real and immersive. When talking about combat in Dead Space, there's no question it's a masterpiece in my eyes. It's crazy how simple the idea for the gameplay was. Hey, let's make a game where shooting the head isn't the easiest way to kill things. Bam, there you go, unique gameplay achieved. Dismember the limbs. Isaac Clarke might be an engineer, but he's also an expert in creating quadriplegics. His boots are also made of just the strongest material possible, as one stomp can dismember several limbs. Each weapon has their own unique laser sight, and it takes time getting used to, but they also have an alternate firing method, which I always thought was something shooters should do a lot more of. It gives each weapon a sort of backup way to handle a situation. You need to be precise to kill the necromorphs. Thing is, it's hard to be precise and aim for the limbs when they're sprinting full speed at you, flailing all around. So sometimes you panic shoot them, but oh shit, you miss, and it scares you even more because the enemy isn't dead, but you just wasted ammo, and now you have to reload and you're vulnerable and you just pissed your pants. There's a lot of neat mechanics in Dead Space that differentiate it from other shooters and other horror games. Kinesis is really cool and versatile, allowing you to pick up items from far away. Oftentimes you can find some secret stashes of weapons or health packs floating off in the distance that would otherwise be unreachable. You can also throw things at the necromorphs, which can stun them, but isn't all that useful unless you're trying to conserve ammo. Kinesis is also used to solve puzzles, open secret areas, all sorts of things. Kinda like what I talked about in my Halo Combat Evolved review, the same applies here. In both games, every enemy type serves a specific function. Within a couple fights, you'll understand what each class of necromorph does. You got the standard slasher, which is kinda like the cannon fodder of the necromorphs. You see these guys more often than the others, and they can quickly overwhelm you if you're not careful. There's the leapers, which leap around and are commonly found in 0G areas. These guys will pounce at you from every conceivable angle, so nowhere is truly safe. Lurkers are... No, this isn't StarCraft. Lurkers are reanimated babies? Man, we're killing babies now? Jesus. And they'll stay at range to pelt you with quills. So shoot those tentacles, use the line gun. Swarmers are little pests that do as their name suggests, and they'll whittle down your health if you're not careful. The Infector is definitely the scariest looking necromorph, as the only means of dismembering it is the proboscis, which only comes out when it starts to infect the body. Pro tip, if you see a lot of corpses in a room with nothing going on, lay the boot on them, cause chances are a couple infectors will pop up there later. Then there's the Pregnant, which functions similar to the Slasher, but is bulkier, slower, and... Ew, it poops out babies? Gross, man, don't shoot the stomach. Brutes are basically the tanks from Left 4 Dead. They serve as great boss fights throughout the game, will absolutely punish you if you're not careful. But if you keep your stasis meter full, you can absolutely destroy them. Guardians are stationary and shoot out these little pods that will harass you. Focus fire on the tentacles and keep moving to avoid the projectiles. These guys are here to defend and lock down areas, so if you get too close to them, they might just slice your head off. The Hunter is basically invincible in the chapters you encounter it, and it keeps pressure on you as you have to fight the other enemies around it. Take off its legs, hit it with some stasis, and run away. The exploders are basically suicide grunts, but luckily those giant yellow ball sacks can be used to your advantage. Cut it off and throw it with kinesis, or shoot it directly and you'll save yourself some ammo and a headache. Of course, the Divider is a big, lanky, and imposing creature that will split off once you do enough damage. Shooting a big man is one thing, but trying to hunt down and exterminate all its pieces is another. And last but not least, they're the Kinesis Slashers, which are insanely fast. Even when they're crawling, man, take these guys out as fast as possible. What's really cool is how the game takes extra special care in introducing new enemy types. For example, we see the Lurker pin this helpless fool in a room filled with infants. I mean, that sets the stage pretty well, don't you think? And when we first fight the Infector, we see exactly how they reanimate corpses into even stronger necromorphs. We get a glimpse of the Brute in Chapter 5 before he smashes through a wall and charges us. And before we even see the full thing, we get a glimpse of the Divider's pieces. But when we do run into one of them for the first time, it's creepy as shit. That low howl, dude, oh my god, it's perfect. Presentation and build-up, I'll say it once more. Dead Space also has a few boss fights, and they do not disappoint. Well, maybe a little bit, but we'll get to that. While the Brute, the Hunter, and even the Dividers lean more to the mini-boss side, I consider the Hunter a full-fledged boss because of how much effort it takes to bring it down. In Chapter 6, after clearing out hydroponics and fixing the air quality, we go into this big chamber, this foreboding hallway, with all this crap on the sides, and then holy shit, that thing is huge and disgusting. This fight is pretty intense and you can never stop moving. You gotta use 0G to avoid the tentacles and kinesis to catch the pods. It takes a long time to kill the Leviathan, and after a while it does get kinda boring and the novelty wears off, but maybe that's just because I was sucking fat tentacles. In Chapter 8, we gotta sweep this giant slug thing off the side of the ship's hull, and it's not a traditional fight. You use the cannons to take it down. It's a fun little gimmick. Finally, we got the Hive Mind, the big motherfucker, and this is just a pure spectacle of a battle. We'd been attacked by the tentacles plenty of times throughout the game. Build up? You get it? Anyways, it's all about shooting the glowy spots until the next phase begins. You know the drill. It's intense as fuck. I remember the first time I was playing Dead Space, it took me like 15 tries to get its patterns down and tame the beast. Realistically though, the hive mind is just a tad disappointing because of how easily it would just absolutely destroy Isaac. Like, realistically, everything else in the game I can actually see Isaac killing and overcoming, but not the hive mind, dude. He would get shreked. All these fights are about dodging, diving, dipping, ducking, and dodging. Positioning is also a key factor in your success. If enemies run away from you or escape, chances are they're making moves to flank you, so watch your back. You need to get familiar with your surroundings so you can have a backup plan if shit goes haywire and you get gangbanged. This is especially true in zero-G areas, as Isaac can hop around the ship and enemies will follow. The zero-G areas are ginormous and often hold a lot of really good items, and you can use the jump mechanic to cleverly outmaneuver the necromorphs. I had far too much fun in the zero-G areas of the game, even if the mechanic itself is a bit janky. So a player needs to be smart about positioning, weapon choice, knowing how many items you have, what you can use in any given situation, and knowing what the enemies do, their behaviors and weaknesses. Understanding all of these things is how you can master the game. And boy oh boy is Dead Space a fun game to master. I mean, the satisfaction you get from mowing them necromorphs down with the Ripper, or placing accurate shots with the plasma cutter, filling them full of lead with the pulse rifle, it all feels so good. Naturally, because mining rocks out in space can be tedious and tiring work, the Ishimura and USM Valor have mini-games where crew members can work on their aim or play basketball, futuristic basketball. You get some nice rewards for doing these mini-games too, and they're a lot of fun. I always appreciate when a game can throw in some little gimmicks like this for some fun on the side. But besides the pure combat I was talking about earlier, the decisions you make before battle are just as important. The store is gonna be your best buddy throughout Dead Space, and every time you see one, you can breathe easy, friend. By picking up schematics throughout the game, you'll unlock the ability to buy ammo for all the guns, new weapons, health packs, everything. And best of all, new suits of armor. Oh hell yeah, I love watching this animation. Isaac just looks so fucking badass. Better suits give you more damage resistance and increase your inventory slots, so they are essential. It's especially important to decide what to use power nodes on and what to upgrade. You'll find these guys on tough enemies or secret spots, these blue panels on the wall, and you can buy them for 10,000 credits each at the store. They ain't cheap, kids. But if you want to stand any chance against the necromorph invasion, you'll need to upgrade your shit. Problem is, with only 4 weapon slots and a very limited amount of power nodes, you basically have to pick 4 weapons and stick with them. Otherwise, you're going to be losing money. Mostly you want to prioritize damage on your guns and get ammo capacity when you're low, because it gives you a free refill. But of course, you'll want to increase your health and air capacity so you don't stress as much. And putting some nodes into your stasis will work wonders and give you more opportunities to bail out of a tough spot. There's so many different paths to choose with all these weapons and gear, and how the upgrade system works is one of the best parts of Dead Space because you feel like you're really getting stronger. And there's not enough money and power nodes to upgrade absolutely everything, so there's an element of replayability if you want to play through with different weapons. Nice thing is, after beating the game, you unlock New Game Plus, some cool gear, and an extra difficulty setting. The gameplay in this video has been on hard. I've beaten the game on impossible, and let me tell you, that is some serious shit right there. I am proud of that. So replayability is pretty high considering this is my 5th or 6th time completing the game, and I'm still having fun. So overall, the gameplay of Dead Space is precisely tuned to perfection, in my opinion. They don't throw too many enemies at you that you get bored immediately, and are no longer scared of the necromorphs. They throw just the right amount of stuff at the player. The trick to an effective, compelling, and frightening horror experience is that the entire game needs to be built around the concept of provoking fear and tension from the player. And when I say the entire game, I mean the entire game. We're talking music, lighting, sound effects, visual aesthetic, gameplay, enemy design, all of it. The goal is not so much in creating horrific, disgusting enemies that gross the player out, but it's more so the way these enemies are presented and revealed. It's not so much what's in the dark that scares you, it's the fear of not knowing. You know, take the Alien movies for example. The first film, the action parts are so impactful and memorable because there's been so much build-up, and they're separated by these huge stretches of quiet moments. So when the alien finally appears, you're on the edge of your seat. you take that loop, implement it in a game, have it happen every few minutes or longer, and you've got a good horror experience. Dead Space teaches you very quickly that the necromorphs can come out from just about anywhere. They can hop out of vents, fly down in zero gravity, pop out around corners, sprint towards you out of the blue, break glass, or anything. The game instills feelings of paranoia throughout. This in turn makes the player very cautious during the quiet moments because you never know when something is gonna just from exploring bathrooms to wide open areas, zero-G environments, even the basketball courts, man. No area is completely safe because again, you don't know what's out there. And the game will constantly throw curveballs at you. You know, 95% of the time you're at the trans station, it's safe, but just that once, that 5%, they threw a necromorph in there to keep you on your toes. And you know, you think you'll be safe shopping or upgrading your gear at the bench because, you know, why wouldn't you be when all of a sudden— What the fuck? You piece of shit! How dare you try to pull that creepy shit on me? Die! Dead Space has this extreme contrast. When an enemy appears, the game gets loud as fuck. But when there's nothing going on, you can hear a pin drop. And for some people, this might be seen as overemphasizing the horror or relying too much on jump scares. But I think it's a nice contrast. You've got the two extremes, quiet and just loud as hell. Other parts of the Ishimura have huge industrial sounds going on, which can obscure the noises the necromorphs make. As a player, you start to rely on these audio cues and sound effects, so when there's other stuff going on, it really amplifies the atmosphere. It makes you even more scared. The biggest mistake I see in sequels like Resident Evil 5, Bioshock 2, Bioshock Infinite, and even Dead Space 2 and 3 is for some reason, the game started to phase out the horror elements in favor of more action. It's like they thought the way to make the sequel better than the original is to just throw more enemies at you, and that doesn't really improve the game or make it any scarier. In fact, it makes it less scary because we see these enemies all the time. I mean, there's parts in Bioshock 2 where you set up a defense and you fight off like 25 splicers, as opposed to, you know, that part in the first game where you pick up a shotgun and you fight off like 6. If you have too much footage revealing the thing that's supposed to be scary, it's not going to be scary. The key word here is build-up. And when it comes to video games, I think build-up is highly underrated. Sometimes you can go 2, 3, 4, 5 whole minutes without any combat. Fear is all psychological, so long pauses like this go far in making the combat more memorable and intense. In a horror game, I'd rather fight 4 enemies after 3 minutes of build-up than 15 after 1 minute of build-up. Think about how memorable that journey to Rapture was. The dialogue at the beginning that ignited a mystery, the plane crashing, walking down the lighthouse, getting into the bathysphere, listening to Andrew Ryan's speech, and getting that big reveal. Remember how impactful it was the way Bioshock slowly unraveled the insanity, terror, and horrific atrocities that incurred in Rapture? Yeah, you know, it takes time to get good shit going, is my point. Dead Space and Bioshock utilize build-up in a similar fashion, but for different things. Bioshock used it to give the story a greater impact, and Dead Space uses it to give the gameplay a greater impact. While I think it's cheesy in Dead Space that within the first 5 minutes the enemy is revealed to you, it's really after that point where the game starts getting good. See, it's not about throwing these monstrous creatures at the player at every turn. There's a certain amount of build-up to the actual combat. It's about mind games, and we're being played by the developers. One of the best examples is when you get on a tram and the fog obscures your view. You're moving in super slow, but as you get closer to the other side, the horrors that lurk within are revealed. And you're set into a panic. For example, there are areas where you enter a vacuum and you have a limited amount of time to breathe. While in many scenarios the air you have is enough, the fact that you are put on a time limit creates pressure. And hearing Isaac's breathing get more and more sporadic raises the tension. Whenever you enter a new area, most of the time you get a chance to take in the surroundings, find items, look at potential hazards or gimmicks, before you cross an invisible line where the enemies spawn. Even after playing this game for the 5th time, there's never been a moment in my playthroughs where I wasn't constantly on edge, as I walked around all the rooms and in outer space. You can tell how stressful, in a good way, Dead Space is with how relieved you feel when you arrive at the tram station, or find a save station, or a store. Other times an area might appear one way, but then you push a button and the whole place transforms. And you're like, fuck, now there's aliens, oh shit, oh god, what do I do? Before you die, because the change in scenery and landscape messed with your mind and any preconceptions of strategy you might have had. The game does have QuickTime events, but they're more like the grapples from Resident Evil 4, so they aren't all that shitty. When an enemy gets a hold of you, you just mash A and there you go. Gameplay-wise, they do slow things down, but it opens the door for the incredibly awesome and gruesome executions. They really went all out with some of these scenes, and it's just like, god damn, are some of them brutal. That extra layer of effort really pays dividends, because once you see a tiny alien rip off Isaac's head and take control of him, you're like, well fuck, I don't want to see that again. Which makes you fear the enemies even more. It's a very gory game, but the gore is used as a means of conveying the desperation and horror of the situation. It serves as a way to show off the horrifying capabilities of the necromorphs. It's all a part of the overall storytelling in my book. So because Dead Space is a survival horror game, that means you've got an inventory to keep track of and countless important decisions along the way about what to keep. The fear of being unprepared for what lies ahead plays a big role in the non-combat parts of Dead Space. Again, build-up. Running out of ammo is scary, but so is not picking up those superconductors to sell them and buy more ammo. Having no stasis to bail you out of a tough spot is a frightening thought, but so is not carrying enough health packs to deal with that giant brute. The ultimate goal of Dead Space is to survive.
Well, duh.
And so you often find yourself scrounging for ammo, health, and everything. But when your inventory is full, there's an extra level of management to it. It's like, I'll use this health pack even though I'm not that damaged so I can pick up this ammo. Or, there was a lot of items I couldn't pick up in that one room, so I'm gonna backtrack and get them now that my inventory cleared up after that huge battle. Dead Space simply makes surviving fun. Whether you're shooting at asteroids headed for the hole, or you're trying to outmaneuver a regenerating necromorph, the game is built around the concepts of fear and tension. And no matter where you look, these elements surface in every corner of the game. Small moments such as walking down this corridor, hearing a banging noise as you slowly approach, expecting something to pop out, only for it to be some guy slamming his head against the wall before he collapses on the ground and dies. These moments build up the tension even when there are no enemies. It's all about toying with the player's mind, making them think there's something there when there's really not. Which is the perfect segue to lead me into the story. The narrative of Dead Space is pretty interesting, if a bit generic. The story takes place in 2508. The Earth has hit a wall. The planet no longer has enough resources to sustain the population, so the Concordance Extraction Corporation, aka CEC, created the planet crackers to gather resources from other worlds. The Ishimura being the flagship planet cracker and the iconic symbol of mankind's will to survive.
So that's Ishimura. Impressive.
The USG Ishimura. Biggest planet cracker in her class. And it looks like they already popped the cork.
As it was mining the planet Aegis 7, some shit happened and that's where Isaac and friends hop in to check it out. That's the backstory. Now the objectives for each mission revolve around Isaac repairing various parts of the Ishimura, such as getting the tram station online so they can move around the ship, or fixing the communications ray to send out an SOS, re-establishing the asteroid defense systems, you get the idea. Hammond for the first 9 chapters takes control and is intent on completing the job, so you mostly take orders from him. Basically, the Earth government quarantined Aegis 7 and made it off-limits to everyone. For 200 years, this barren wasteland sat there before the Church of Unitology disregarded the quarantine and infiltrated the Ishimura before heading to Aegis 7 to recover their holy relic, the Marker. And behold its glory, it is truly magnificent. The Church of Unitology is your typical group of religious fanatics who have to fucking ruin everything because they're dumb and stupid.
Accept your part in the God's plan. Embrace your own extinction.
Essentially, their goals are, the necromorph transformation will cure all of humanity's problems. Ah, praise be. This is mankind's next step on the path of evolution. We've all seen this type of villainous organization before. So they uncovered the red marker on the surface of Aegis 7 and brought it aboard the ship. Soon afterwards, everything went straight to hell. Crew members started hallucinating, symptoms of schizophrenia were running rampant, paranoia, bloodlust, murder, torture, all started to tear apart the crew of the Ishimura. But just like retards, they think this is all meant to be, and their religious indoctrination further drives the ship into madness. With the medical staff being unable to diagnose the cause of all this shit, most of the crew turned into homicidal, suicidal maniacs. So much of the story is uncovered in data logs, video recordings, writing on the wall, and through the level design. I appreciate the indirect approach of storytelling they took with Dead Space. As you fight your way through the Ishimura, Isaac's girlfriend Nicole consistently appears to help you out. God damn, Isaac is gonna snuggle her good when all is said and done. Throughout the game, this fucking asshole Chalice Mercer tries to send his goons after you. He kills people and tries to usher in this new age of necromorph humans, which for some reason he thinks is the right thing to do. Anyway, the cast of characters are all servable, they feel real, dialogue is great and engaging, I have no complaints really, and the villains work for the most part. There's a lot of creepy dialogue and Nicole is the creep lord in this respect. Her vague and constant requests to
make us whole again.
It just fills you with the Ghiblies, man. What happened aboard the Ishimura is shown to the player, more so than it is told to you. There's a big focus on environmental storytelling, and just by exploring the place, you kind of piece together what happened. So near the end, Isaac and Dr. Kyne team up to put the marker back where it belongs and seal the nightmare off once and for all. But Kendra Daniels has other plans.
There's no time to waste, we must do it!
Oh shit, you just shot that guy. Man, aren't you a bitch? And then she reveals that this marker was made by the government, reverse engineered from the original marker and put on Aegis 7 so the government could study its effects. Apparently the helix shape of the marker and the codes written on it is the DNA code for the necromorph infection, which is really freaking cool. And this makes all those symbols and things you see throughout the game on the walls much more interesting, as now there is an explained reason for all these symbols. And Kendra is here to take it to her superiors. But Isaac ain't about to let that happen because Nicole is here to help us get through this shit. Let's go, baby! Finish the fight! We're gonna finish this together, make us whole. So we head down to the colony, fight through a bunch of necromorphs before we finally bring the marker back to its resting place. It's over.
Thank you, Isaac. I always believed in you. I knew you'd return to me. We are whole again, Isaac. We are whole.
It's all over. Wait, no, of course it isn't. Kendra shows up, locks us out, and is taking it back to the ship before revealing the truth we all pretty much knew, that Nicole is dead.
What? There's no way that can be right!
Isaac has an emotional moment, and so do we. It's pretty cool that if you line up the first letter of each chapter, it spells this out for you. Neat little detail. So we head back to the ship, and oh god! What's happening? What? Oh god, it's the tentacles! We saw them all over the Ishimura. What's happening? What? Holy Jeebus. The Hive Mind. The Grave Mind 2.0. Whatever you want to call it. This is one of the most epic showdowns in video game history. The Hive Mind is an absolute beast. Just look at this thing. And you're able to subdue it before the giant asteroid smashes into Aegis 7. But Isaac still needs to escape, so he runs to the ship, powers it up, and gets the fuck out of there. I'm getting some serious Combat Evolved vibes with the way this game ends in fireworks.
Halo. It's finished.
No. I think we're just getting started.
So it's finally over. For real this time. Isaac, man, you can rest easy. A breath of relief as, What is that? Wait, who is that? Ah! And that's the story of Dead Space. Great fucking ending with that Nicole jump scare, and perfectly sets up the plot of Dead Space 2. It's a thrilling ride from start to finish, and there's never really a dull moment, or parts with excessive dialogue, or characters making stupid decisions. None of those typical horror genre pitfalls. Dead Space at its core is about conquering fear. The fear of losing a loved one. Fear of the truth you know deep down. The lesson is to beat the fuck out of the things that scare you. I always wondered what the make us whole again thing was all about until I finally realized that it's the marker's way of trying to communicate with Isaac and the other people on the Ishimura to get itself placed back on the pedestal. Make us whole. The marker has some sentience, it can reach out and touch minds, and so one of the villains in this game is a seemingly inanimate object with motivations we don't quite understand. We have countless questions about it, but we don't have all the answers, and that's the way it should be. You keep some mystery on the table, and it keeps us engaged. While the game takes roughly 8 to 15 hours to complete, it feels just long enough to satisfy me. The Church of Unitology might be a bit generic, but the overall world building and lore of this game are just so intriguing to me. Everything about Dead Space just got me invested in this universe, because the gameplay, setting, presentation, and story were so interesting and interwoven. With all these elements at play, Dead Space really is a once-in-a-lifetime experience for gamers. The combat is nailed to a T with excellent build-up that raises the drama and tension aboard the Ishimura. Boss battles are fantastic, the zero-G environments add some neat mechanics and locations to the game. Enemies all have their unique roles, they're intimidating, scary, and fun to fight. Weapons have their own specializations, and nothing is more fun than going to town on these undead bastards. The universe of Dead Space is interesting, it gives you just enough within the plot, but builds upon it through audio logs, data logs, video recordings, all that optional material. The dialogue and characters service the plot and universe of the story, without being too exaggerated or too bare bones. Sound effects, style, lighting are all superb in nailing the tone of an isolated ship in space succumb to madness and murder. And somehow, 10 years later, the game still looks great, like it hasn't aged a day. Despite taking plenty of inspiration from Resident Evil 4, Dead Space was able to carve out its own niche in the third-person shooter and horror games genre. It's an experience that once you've played, you won't ever forget, and it just might make you go a little crazy. And that is why Dead Space 1 was so awesome.